for the Honourable Member for Melbourne.
To oppose this bill on behalf of the Greens and to record our shame and disgust that Labor is now supporting a position that will see people who may have done nothing wrong at all locked up for years on end. Madam Speaker, this is Kafka on steroids. If this legislation passes, it will mean that someone who comes here seeking our help and is told, no, we can't help you because there's a security assessment, and who then says, well, I think that's not right, I want to challenge it, tell me why you say I can't be here, will be told, no, we can't tell you because that's a matter of national security.
That was the federal member for Melbourne, Adam Bandt, speaking about the plight of refugees with adverse security assessments from ASIO. You're watching The World from Below. I'm Lizzie O'Shea. Today we're joined by Daniel Webb from the Human Rights Law Centre. Daniel is the Director of Legal Advocacy at the HRLC and works on refugee rights and the rights of all people in all forms of detention. Prior to joining the HRLC, Daniel was a senior lawyer with Victoria Legal Aid, specialising in mental health and disability advocacy. For 12 months, Daniel was also the People's Lawyer in the Republic of Kiribati. Daniel joins us today to discuss the role of ASIO in the Department of Immigration, specifically the plight of refugees with adverse security assessments who are indefinitely detained. Now, as a lawyer, I've acted for refugees in this predicament, but Daniel, can you explain to us how it is that people are indefinitely detained?
Sure. Well, every asylum seeker who comes to Australia and applies for a protection visa has to get a security assessment from ASIO. It's usually the last step or one of the last steps in the processing of their claim, so it happens after they've been found to be a refugee. Now, if they don't get a clean bill of health from ASIO, they are automatically denied a visa, they are automatically denied the right to ever apply for one again, and they're automatically detained. Now, because they're a refugee, it's not safe for them to return back to their home country, and because they've got this ASIO assessment hanging over their heads, the government won't allow them into the community. So they languish in detention in this sort of indefinite limbo.
So these are people who would otherwise be entitled to a protection visa, so they've got a well-founded fear of persecution.
That's right. These are people who've proved to our government that they will face persecution if we return them. But the fact that they've got this ASIO assessment means the government won't give them a visa and the government won't release them into the community.
So what kind of rights do these people have?
Well, anyone else in Australia, you or I or anyone else who gets a negative assessment from ASIO has the right to appeal that assessment to a special part of the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, and we would have the right to a summary of the information and reasoning on which that assessment was based. Refugees don't have either of those basic rights. So for them, the stakes are much higher, but their rights are much fewer, and they can and are indefinitely detained on the basis of secretive decisions that they can't appeal and that are never explained to them. And I mean, it's important to reflect, I think, on the fact that in this country we can appeal everything from parking fines to public transport infringements. I mean, every weekend in the football or whatever, people seek review of goal umpiring decisions. Surely entire families indefinitely detained should have the basic right to review the decision that's keeping them locked up.
If a citizen, say, had an adverse security assessment, though, presumably the consequences for them are quite different. You aren't automatically detained. So it may be the case that, can citizens have an adverse security assessment without knowing it, for example? Would you always know?
So a citizen might need a security assessment from ASIO to get a certain government job that requires a high level of security clearance, working in customs or something like that. So for them, the consequences of not getting a clean bill of health from ASIO, I mean, they're significant, but they don't lead to indefinite incarceration. But even though the stakes are much lower for them, they still have a right to reasons from ASIO as to why they've been deemed a risk, and they still have the right to lodge an appeal against that decision. only refugees don't have that right. It's a clear inequality before the law, and it's one that's without justification and one that absolutely must be fixed.
And this group includes, as you said, families as well as single men, say?
Yeah, entire families, single men. I mean, the children may not have received an adverse security assessment, but then they're in this horrible situation where if their parents are locked up, their options are be permanently separated from their parents or grow up in a detention centre, and that's a truly horrible situation for anyone to be in.
And how long have some of these people been detained for? I mean, we were reading reports about it being indefinite, obviously, but what kind of time periods are we talking about?
Well, we at the Human Rights Law Centre assisted one family who'd spent 4 years in detention. So a husband, a wife and 3 children. One of those children was born in immigration detention, and they were found to be refugees, and they were locked up for 4 years on the basis of one of these ASIO security assessments. It was never explained to them why they were assessed to be a risk. They never had the right to appeal the assessment. We helped them take their case to the High Court, along with a law firm that was assisting pro bono, and just days before that High Court hearing, ASIO pulled the assessment and the family was released. So
does the family have any idea why they were detained?
No, they don't. And I mean, their treatment begs the question, if, like everyone else in this country, they had the right to appeal that assessment, maybe they could have been released 4 years sooner.
So there's been proposed amendments to the ASIO Act introduced this week into Federal Parliament by independent member Andrew Wilkie, which would ensure that refugees indefinitely detained in this situation would have the same right to appeal that decision as a citizen like you or I. What do you make of these? Oh, before that, I'd just like to show you a clip of Andrew Wilkie actually introducing the bill.
Deputy Speaker, I move that this bill be now read a second time. Deputy Speaker, the purpose of this bill is to reinstate the right of access to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal for asylum seekers with adverse security assessments. The bottom line is that in our law, an asylum seeker is regarded as a second-class human being that somehow is inferior and should have less rights than an Australian citizen. And that's wrong, Deputy Speaker, and this bill would remedy that by removing that carve-out from asylum seekers from the relevant part of the ASIO Act.
So tell me, what is the significance of this bill?
Well, the bill, as you said, would give refugees no more, no less than every other person in this country has in respect of ASIO assessments. It would give refugees the right to appeal them, and it would give refugees the right to a summary of ASIO's information and reasoning. It's important to recognise that the bill doesn't require that anyone be let out of detention. It doesn't in any way limit the important role that ASIO plays in assessing whether people who seek to come to this country pose any threat to Australian people. It simply says when ASIO says a refugee doesn't meet its security test, that decision is just as open to review and just as accountable as it is if it was made in respect of anyone else. And
that would presumably mean that you access the reasons for the decision, you're able to perhaps challenge any parts that you disagree with, presumably.
That's right. I mean, it's impossible to challenge the reasoning in a decision that's never explained to you. So ASIO, like all decision makers, from time to time will make mistakes. And the consequences of a mistake here is that a family will be potentially locked up forever. And it is a very important role that ASIO plays. We need them to play it. They do need to conduct these security assessments. But just like they are when they're made in respect of other people in this country, when they're made in respect of a refugee, they should be subject to review by the Specialist Administrative Appeals Tribunal that reviews everyone else's security assessments.
I understand there's quite significant mental health consequences for a lot of people who are in this category. Can you tell us a bit about the kind of impact these assessments have on people in this position?
Yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't take much imagination to understand the effect that this would have on people. I mean, these are people who have demonstrated, have proved that they've fled persecution. So Often they're people who've survived torture or been through horrific ordeals in their past. They've fled to Australia, proved their need for protection. They're locked up. They're never told why. They can't appeal. They don't know how long they're going to be there for. They've got nowhere else to go. That uncertainty, that indefinite legal limbo, is incredibly harmful. And we've heard recently that many of these people who are detained indefinitely have attempted suicide. And yeah, I mean, I think their predicament is tragic, and it's really inexplicable that, given the consequences that are flowing to them from these ASIO assessments, they don't have the same right to appeal them as everyone else.
Okay, we're going to take a short break, but we'll be back further to talk with our guest Daniel Webb from the Human Rights Law Centre.